All right, Hotep. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it is Wednesday, March 24th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. So I wanted to come on once again and do an overview of the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 8-week, 16-hour online course that I teach, and we deal with thousands of years of history. Normally, we do it on Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we know that African American History Month just passed. And, oftentimes you will hear a number of stories about lessons involving slavery going wrong in our schools, especially during African American History Month. Okay. And this past February was no exception. We saw a number of different stories about insensitivity when it came to stories dealing with or lessons dealing with African American history. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I want to do an overview of the class as well to show you exactly what we cover in the class. So I do a PowerPoint presentation, and we deal with thousands of years of history, and we deal with what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place also. Okay. And we have to deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. And oftentimes that's a missing link in the history, because many people mistakenly think that when the transatlantic slave trade starts in the mid 15th century, this is when Europeans first come in contact with African people. And that's just not true at all. All right, so I want to bring up the PowerPoint presentation. We'll do a brief overview of this. Now, you can register for the online course also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I'll post a link here as well. The class normally meets on Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if I can't do it on Tuesday, then we'll do it on Wednesday. All right, we'll do it the next day. Okay, so let's look at this here. I want to show you one quick story here. Now, this is from USA Today. I talked about this on my radio show, the African History Network show. This deals with some slave lessons gone wrong and lessons about slavery gone wrong. This is from March 4th, 2021. Mock slave auctions, racist lessons, how U.S. history class often traumatizes, dehumanizes Black students. How U.S. history class often traumatizes, dehumanizes Black students. So you've heard me talk before about how America needs a massive history lesson, okay? And all of this is connected with the fight against the voter restriction laws in Georgia, the Republicans trying to push through 253 voter restriction bills in 43 state legislatures, the fight over the Confederate monuments and Confederate battle flag. All this deals with not clearly understanding history. And then when we look in our schools, we see these lessons dealing with slavery that are oftentimes dehumanizing to African Americans, and they could be very insensitive and oftentimes inaccurate. And one of the things that you hear me talk about is the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center called Teaching Hard History, American Slavery, Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. And I use this in the online course, but in a lot of presentations that I do, I talk about this as well. And this study documents how the history of slavery is oftentimes mistaught, incorrectly taught in schools all across the country. and it gives numerous recommendations on how to more accurately and more correctly teach that history. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a minute here. All right, how's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in. In the class, I do it live normally on Tuesdays. As we record all the sessions, as soon as you register, you can go back, watch last week's class. You can watch the classes that you missed. This time around, in teaching the classes, is the first time I've taught this class since 2019. This time around teaching it, we're going to end up doing 9 weeks because I had 2 guest speakers a few weeks ago. Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. He wrote this book. He was a guest speaker in my class. And then also Sister Nubia Wardford, who's a cultural anthropologist. She was a guest speaker a few weeks ago as well. So we're going to end up doing 9 weeks instead of 8 weeks. So the class is regularly $130. It's on sale $80. You can watch the classes from around the world. You can watch them over and over again. And you can use them with your children as well. I would say the classes are PG-13. Okay. So if we look very quickly here at this article, and then we also see the fight. I'm going to show you another article in just a minute. We see a fight in certain state legislatures trying to control what teachers can teach about slavery and racism and oppression, things like this as well. Okay. So this article is from March 4th, 2021. It talks about how on Wednesday, an official at a Mississippi middle school apologized after 8th graders were asked to pretend they were enslaved people, including writing letters discussing their journey to America and the family they live with or work for. During Black History Month 2021, a Florida high school teacher was suspended with pay after allegedly telling students slaves were not whipped by white people and that the N-word, a racist slur, quote, just means ignorant, end quote. In February 2020, a student teacher in Tennessee gave her 4th grade students an assignment called Let's Make a Slave, about a speech from the 1700s about keeping Black slaves under control. All right. Now, I'm not sure if they were dealing with let's click on this link here. I don't remember. I hope they're not talking about the fake Willie Lynch letter of 1712. Let's make on November 3rd. Okay, so let's look at this article here. See, this is what happens to a lot of our children in schools. Okay. And it could be public school, private school. It could be independent school. It could be a homeschool, because I'll be the first one to tell you, there's some people doing homeschooling, don't know what the hell they're doing. Okay, so it's not specific to the type of school. All right. The problem is a lot of the information is just wrong. Okay. Metro School's employee alleges she was demoted after complaining about slavery assignment. This is from December 1st, 2020. Metro School's employee alleges she was demoted after complaining about slavery assignment. So if you've seen my broadcasts over the past few years, you know I've done a number of them dealing with slave history lessons gone wrong, slavery history lessons gone wrong. We see this every February. Now we'll see this throughout the year, but especially in the month of February for African American History Month, we'll see this. Okay. All right. So it says a Metro Nashville public school employee has filed a lawsuit alleging she was demoted from her position with the district after filing a first lawsuit on behalf of her son over a controversial assignment taught at Waverly Belmont Elementary School early this year, early 2020. The employee, who is referred to as Jane Doe in the documents to protect the identity of her children, alleges that she was fired from her position in Metro's central office and was then passed over for a new position after filing a lawsuit on behalf of her child in November. Now, on November 3rd, the Nashville family filed a lawsuit over the assignment called Let's Make a Slave, which was given to a 4th grade class in February. Okay, this is during Black History Month. The assignment focused on a speech said to have been given in the 1700s by West Indian plantation owner Willie Lynch to white Virginia colonists about how to control their slaves. Now, already red flags are going off already. And we talk about this in the class. And some of you all who are in the class now, you know, we've mentioned this so far. Willie Lynch never historically existed. Willie Lynch never historically existed. The Willie Lynch letter has been proven to be a fraud. Okay, their words in the Willie Lynch letter 1712, their words in the Willie Lynch letter that didn't exist in early 18th century. So the letter was written by Dr. Kwabena Ashanti. He came out and admitted it. He wrote it in about 1970. He was trying to show how African Americans were acting like slaves, but the letter has been proven to be a fraud. And then if you research Professor Manu Ampem, and I've interviewed Professor Manu Ampem a number of times, he has a series of essays called "Death to the Willie Lynch Letter." Death to the Willie Lynch Letter. He goes through step by step and shows you how the Willie Lynch letter is a fraud. So, see, once again, for them to use this as a teaching tool is just backwards. I was going to call it as backwards, but it's just wrong. It's just it's just wrong. Okay, it's false. It's as wrong as that fake 1776 project that Donald Trump commissioned, and thankfully Joe Biden dismantled the commission and took down that BS report that the commission put together and Trump put on whitehouse.gov. But I want to go back to this article for a second because this deals with you know, this is one of the reasons why the class that I teach is so important. And I share this type of information with people. I share this type of information with parents and try to give them some resources to use with their children. But also I tell them, you know, you can share these resources with the teachers, because a lot of the teachers in school, and this is why this study from the Southern Poverty Law Center is so important, teaching hard history, American slavery, because a lot of teachers mean well, but they don't have the proper resources. They don't have the proper tools. And some of them just don't know. Some teachers mean well, but just don't know. And this is one of the things that the study explains. Now, you can download this study from splcenter.org, splcenter.org, and that's Southern Poverty Law Center, and search for teaching hard history. Okay, teaching hard history. And you can actually download the study. I downloaded it, took it to a printer, got it printed up. Okay, I'll show you some information from the study in just a minute here. But I want to deal with this because these things like this happen to our children in schools. Okay, and I read about this stuff, and a lot of times, you know, parents don't know what to do about it. But so for this was during February. This is during Black History Month. The assignment focused on a speech said to have been given in the 1700s by West Indian plantation owner Willie Lynch to white Virginia colonists about how to control their slaves. Now, right there, whatever teacher uses doesn't know what they're doing. Now, in the new lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court on November 24th, 2020, Jane Doe claims that her previous job position was eliminated and she was demoted back to a classroom teaching position, and only then because she is tenured, in retaliation for her speaking out and filing the first lawsuit over the assignment and the harm her son suffered. Okay, so here you have this sister speaking out against this bogus history lesson, or African American history lesson, and they're using a fake speech in the lesson, and she's speaking out against the lesson and talking about the harm that her son suffered. Now, the lawsuit alleges that Metro schools violated Jane Doe's First Amendment and 14th Amendment rights to free speech and due process, as well as violated the Tennessee Human Rights Act when metro schools discriminated against Jane Doe and selected a less qualified male candidate for the position she applied for. Okay. So read the rest of this, and it talks about let's look at this here, the initial lawsuit. The initial lawsuit filed November 3rd alleged that Jane Doe's son, referred to as John Doe in court documents, suffered repeated acts of racial harassment by adults and peers when the Let's Make a Slave assignment was presented in class. The lawsuit alleges that both the teacher, Andrew Herman, and the school district had knowledge of the harassment and the, quote, racially hostile educational environment, end quote, but were indifferent to the circumstances. Racially hostile educational environment. Now, the assignment required students to read the speech. This is the fake Willie Lynch speech of 1712. I've done a lot of research on the speech. I've done lectures in the past, and I've interviewed Professor Manu and Pim a couple of times dealing with and going through breaking down the fake Willie Lynch letter 1712. Willie Lynch never historically existed. The letter was written in about 1970. There are words in the speech like self-refueling that are 20th century words, not 18th century words. Self-refueling comes from the transportation industry. The letters are fraud. So the assignment required students to read the speech, listen to the instructions contained in the speech, and even pretend to be actual slaves by folding themselves under their desks and pretending to seek freedom from slavery, according to the lawsuit. Now, see, when I hear things about stuff like this happen to our children, it pisses me off, because if you read the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Teaching Hard History, American Slavery, one of the things, now this is a free study. Now, how I know about it and teachers that have teaching certificates don't know about it, I don't understand. I'm still trying to figure that out. One of the things they tell you in the study is don't do slave reenactments, don't do mock slave auctions. They tell you don't do these things because they can be harmful, not just to African American children, but children in general. Okay, so I don't understand why teachers who have teaching certificates and went to school for education, I don't understand why they're still doing this. Every school district in America should be using this study. It's free. I don't understand it. It's free. I took this to the printer, got it printed up. It's free to download. I'm still trying to figure this out. Okay, so let's continue. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in as well. And I'm going to do an overview of the online course that I teach, also called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We'll post a link here. You can register for the online course. We normally do it Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But the next class is going to be Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. Okay, so you can register for that, and we get deep into the history. All right, I want to go back and look at this article, because this is very, very important here about things like this that are happening to our children. Okay, let's go back to this. Let's turn the screen share back on. Okay, so the assignment required students to read the speech, listen to the instructions contained in the speech, and even pretend to be actual slaves by folding themselves under their desks and pretending to seek freedom from slavery, according to the lawsuit. Now, the family claims that the wild, graphic, and inappropriate content caused physical and emotional harm to their child, and then at the time a fourth grader who has autism. And I can see this. I can see this happening, because you don't do this to children. You don't have you notice they don't have like mock concentration camp reenactments of the Jews going into concentration camps. They don't do that as a school assignment. You ever realize that? They don't have, mock Holocaust reenactments as a school assignment. Okay, it's only our Holocaust where they think it's appropriate to do that and traumatize our children and traumatize other children. It's not just African American children that can be traumatized from that, but especially African American children. So the assignment led to community outrage earlier this year, so earlier 2020, rightfully so, including calls from community and city leaders asking for stronger oversight and policies for the district, which serves nearly 70% Black, African American, and Hispanic children. A student teacher from Vanderbilt University led the lesson under the supervision of Andrew, I think it was Andrew Herman, I think was the name, and was dismissed by Metro Nashville Public Schools following the incident. Herman was also placed on administrative leave at the time, but has since returned to employment by the district. At the time, the district characterized the content of the assignment as not age appropriate or within the scope of sequence for the fourth grade class. No, it's not appropriate for any age because the speech is a fraud. It's not appropriate for any age because the teaching tool that you're using is a fraud. It'd be like if you tried to teach. It'd be like if you try to teach history using Twice the Night Before Christmas as the foundation. Okay, and you're trying to explain Christmas using Santa Claus and reindeers. Okay, how the little kids, if you got little kids around, they don't exist. Read the rest. I don't want to get tied up in this because it's going to raise my blood pressure. Read the rest of this article here. This is from December 1st, 2020. Metro Schools employee alleges she was demoted after complaining about slavery assignment. Okay, we'll post a link here. This is from USA Today. Then we look at go back to the main article I was looking at. But this is an example of this. Okay, and this is why in some of these articles they'll cite the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center teaching hard history of American slavery. I think they cited in this article as well. I saw this earlier in March and wanted to talk about this on my daily show, the African History Network show. I know a lot of you all watch the African History Network show or go back and watch the rebroadcast, but I haven't had time to squeeze this in. We've been covering what's going on in Georgia and the voter suppression tactics in Georgia and a number of different things, and I haven't had a chance to squeeze this in. Mock slave auctions, racist lessons, how U.S. history class often traumatizes, dehumanizes Black students. Okay, so if we look at this here, so we talked about the class from February 2020. That's a Black History Month lesson, February 2020. In 2019, a fifth grade teacher was accused of holding a mock slave auction in which white students hid a bid on Black students in New York. Now, I talked about that. I did a whole broadcast dealing with that one. We may rebroadcast that out to see. I have so much content. I've been going through looking at some of the archives. I've been going through, and I'm still editing the video from like the past couple of weeks, shows from the past couple of weeks. I'm still, I've got so much content. We may rebroadcast that. That one dealing with what took place in New York. Okay. Also, African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. We have a few slots that are open now. Email us at email us at ahnshow@africanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@africanhistorynetwork.com to advertise with the African History Network or to find out about advertising with the African History Network. Okay, let's continue here. Just 1 second here. All right. So I want to go back to this article, then I'm going to show you some of the slides. We'll do an overview of the content that I cover in the class, the online class. But oftentimes when stories like this happen, very few people actually talk about them. Now they'll talk about gossip, bunch of BS, but they want this stuff directly impacts our children. So such careless assignments and lessons can traumatize students, experts said. And they are just one example of how teachers in the USA have long struggled and failed to teach the complex history of slavery. Now, Kefferlin Brown, a professor of cultural studies in education at the University of Texas, said, unfortunately, slavery is addressed often in ways that are either marginalized or it's the other way, or it's the only way that Black people are brought into the curriculum. Now, Kefferlin Brown is cited in the study Teaching Hard History American Slavery. He did not want to be Black anymore. He did not want to be Black anymore. Lawsuit filed. Child was told. Okay, so in this particular one, in May 2019, teacher Patricia Bailey made Nicole Day's son, another Black student, stand in front of their class while other students bid on them during a social studies lesson at North Elementary School. Okay, so that case, I actually went in depth and covered that case. It needs more context. It should not have happened, but there was a lawsuit behind that as well. What actually happened really needs more context than is what is here. The child was apparently traumatized, though. That's why you should not do reenactments. But I this particular one, that's the one that I remember. Let me see. The children were told to refer to the winning students as masters and were warned not to try to escape because they would be chased down and violence would be done to them, according to the report. Okay, so I don't think it was this case. It was another one. There was another case that I covered and I did a in-depth broadcast on. And I got statements from I played statements from the teacher, her attorney, but also parents that came out in defense of the non-white parents that came out in defense of the teacher. That particular one, and I have to look and see which one. It was dealing with bidding on slaves. That particular one, even that particular one is, I would say, is different than some of these other cases. Let me put it like that. There was no ill intention, and it was a question a student asked. A student asked the question, well, how could white people sell Black people like this? You know, how could they do that? So she said, okay, let me explain it to you. Let me show you. This is a bad thing to do, but it's different than some of these other cases. So in this one right here, the children were told to refer to the winning students as masters and were warned not to try to escape because they would, quote, be chased down and violence would be done to them, according to a report from the New York Attorney General's office. Now, Nicole Days said her son had to receive counseling after the incident, which the Attorney General's office found had a profoundly negative effect on all students present, especially the African American students. He told me that he did not want to be Black anymore, Nicole Days said. He didn't want to go to school because he didn't know if he could trust the teachers. Now, more than a year and a half after the incident, Nicole Days said her son, 12 years old, still worries that he's judged because he's black when they're out in public. Okay, still worries that he's judged because he's black when they're out in public, and his friendships have been seriously affected. All right, so check out the rest of this article. This deals with when slave lessons and history lessons go wrong in schools, mock slave auctions, racist lessons, how U.S. history class often traumatizes, dehumanizes black students. Okay, all right, so um, so let's look at this. I want to bring up the PowerPoint presentation. We'll bring up the slides. I'm going to we'll do an overview of some of uh, the content of the online class that I teach: ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, let's look at this here. Because I deal with some of this in the class, and we deal with the talk some about the study teaching hard history, American slavery. So once again, let me show you this study here. I'll show you the cover of it. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And there was this article here. I first found out about this study back in February of 2018. There was an article from the Atlantic.com called What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. A new report finds that the topic is mistaught and often sentimentalized, and students are alarmingly misinformed as a result. Okay. And it goes through and talks about how they did a survey of 1,000 high school seniors and 1,700 social studies teachers. The group reviewed 10 commonly used U.S. history textbooks and examined 15 sets of state standards as well to assess what students know. What they found in the study, in the survey of 1,000 high school seniors, what they found was that among 12th graders, only about 8%, only 8% of 12th graders surveyed could identify slavery as the cause of the U.S. Civil War. Only 8% of high school seniors surveyed could identify slavery as the cause of the U.S. Civil War. Fewer than 1/3, or only 32%, could correctly name the 13th Amendment as the formal end of U.S. slavery. 35% thought it was the Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863, which did not end slavery and really didn't free the slaves at all. And fewer than half, 46%, identified the Middle Passage as the transport of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to North America. So read this article here from the Atlantic. They go more in depth into this. What kids are really learning about slavery. Now, some people say reparations. Now, my response, if you watch my show, we deal with this historically and based upon law, and we deal with what is the process. My response would be reparations. How? Explain to me the process. Because most people talk about reparations, can't tell you the actual process to get it. And it takes 218 votes to get a bill passed in the House of Representatives. It'll take 60 votes to get a bill passed in the Senate. You don't have that in either the House or the Senate right now. You got maybe about 178 votes for HR 40 in the House of Representatives, but that's a resolution. That's not an actual bill. That's not going to become law. That's HR 40. That's a resolution. You have to understand the difference between a House resolution, a House bill, and a House joint resolution. You don't have, if you can't get a bill passed to study reparations, how are you going to get one passed to pay reparations? Go watch the bill. Go watch the show that I did, the Sunday show from Sunday. What day was that? No, I think we did it Monday, March 22nd, dealing with Evanston, Illinois, and reparations for redlining that they're going to disperse in Evanston, Illinois to African Americans. Go watch that one. We go deep into it. Then go watch the March 7th show why I talked about Evanston, Illinois, March 7th, 2021. And we went deep into it, and I laid out understanding what reparations is. Reparations is not a check. A check can be part of an overall compensation package. This is what happens when people don't understand history. Reparations means to repair the damage. If you're talking about repairing the damage of slavery, repairing the damage means to restore you to a state prior to the damage being done. This is what repairing, this is what the concept of reparations is, to make people whole again, to restore them to a state that they were in prior to the damage being done. Well, to actually understand reparations for African Americans, you first have to understand and analyze who African people were before the damage was done. Who African people were and what we had before we were put into a system of slavery. We were people who had our history, our culture, our language, our spiritual systems, our names, our family ties, our folklore, our mores, our cosmology, our cosmogony. We had a cultural paradigm that we saw reality through that every other ethnic group of people here in America have. A people's history and culture is what they use in this country to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. So now we're largely a people who've largely been taught to hate themselves. Most of us still have our slave masters' names. We've been taught to see reality through the eyes of Europeans. So when you just reduce reparations down to a check, you're not doing a systems analysis, and you're talking about giving money to people who largely been taught to hate themselves. And year after year, we go to conferences that talk about how we spend 97% of our dollars with people that don't look like us. So if we all got $500,000 a day, I guarantee you white people will have it all back this time next week. And at the same time, because you haven't done a systems analysis, you're not dealing with the laws and policies that were put in place to bring about the structural inequities to bring us to this place to bring us to where we are right now. So in addition to repairing the damage and restoring us, you also have to change the laws and policies that are still in place that brought about the structural inequities in the first place. This is why we have to have a systems analysis when we deal with repairing the damage. And look at the study from Citigroup Bank, and I've talked about it a number of times. Look at the study from Citigroup Bank that shows how the U.S. economy lost $16 trillion over a 20-year period of time from the year 2000 to the year 2020 because of racism and discrimination, and how if it corrects these policies and the racial wealth gap and things like this, it can add $5 trillion to the U.S. economy over 5 years. It's CBS News has the article. We'll look at it quickly here. Because see, this is why when people say reparations now, my response is reparations how? Explain to me the process. First thing you have to do is read the U.S. Constitution, because a lot of our people don't understand the Constitution and don't understand that bills, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution clearly tells you that Congress controls the power of the purse. So bills dealing with taxation and appropriating money, that has to pass the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate and be signed into law by a president. Okay, so a lot of this stuff floating around dealing with reparations is just nonsense. Okay, let's look at this here. Reparations has cost the U.S. $16 trillion, Citigroup fines. Reparations has cost the U.S. $16 trillion Citigroup fines. This is on September 23rd, 2020. I've done a whole presentation that we air a number of times dealing with this. America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for the inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between Black and white Americans over the past 20 years, new research concludes. The study released this week by Citigroup Bank is the latest in a body of research, that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. Now, racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism has nothing to do with not liking people, calling people racial epithets, calling people the N-word, things like that. That's not racism. That's bigotry. Racism is a power structure. Racism is a group-to-group relationship. This is why we have to be very careful when people try to obfuscate, okay, what racism is, and then reduce it down to calling people racial epithets, calling people racial slurs, and then say black people are just as racist as white people. No, you don't want to actually deal with the power structure and actually deal with what racism is and how racism comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy, and it's designed to preserve genetic white survival. You're trying to confuse people on what racism is. We cannot allow that to happen. The study released by Citigroup is the latest in a body of research that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. Citigroup arrived at a $16 trillion figure after estimating that African-American workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. The housing market lost $218 billion in sales because African-American applicants could not get home loans. And about $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because African-American entrepreneurs could not get access to bank loans. What's more, the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if those gaps and others were closed today, the study indicated. So you're dealing with closing the gaps, which deals with changing the laws. The reason why you have to do this is because if we were able to get reparations today, right now, and it was just in the form of money, I guarantee you in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, we'll be right back in the same predicament. But the problem is there'll be less people who will be willing to listen to our issues and our complaints because they said, well, you said cut the check. We cut you a check. You right back in the same predicament. That's your fault. We ain't dealing with this anymore. This is why you have to do a systems analysis. You have to change the laws and policies that were put in place that brought us to where we are right now. That's part of repairing the damage. This is why trying to equate reparations with a check is ass backwards. You don't understand what happened. You can't just reduce that down to a check. You got to correct the laws and policies that are still on the books that brought us to this point. Hopefully y'all understand what I'm talking about. All right, read this article. Now, there are a lot of people that mean well and things like that and say, cut the check. No, do the research. It's more than that. Cash payments can be part of a comprehensive reparations package. Ain't nowhere in the hell reparations should only be in the form of money. Oh, no. Every year, reports come out and we read articles and go to conferences that talk about how we spend 97% of our dollars with people that don't look like us. What do you think is going to happen if we all get a bunch of money? You think that spending pattern all of a sudden is going to change and get better? If anything, it's going to get worse. All right. So read that. Okay, so let's go back to the actual presentation. So these are some of the slides from the online class that I teach, and this is an overview of it. How's everybody doing? Those just tuning in. I'm doing an overview of an online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Okay, so let's look at this here. This is an interesting study right here, and I've been looking at these studies for years. New studies find that positive feelings about Blackness improve academic performance for Black girls. New studies find that positive feelings about Blackness improve academic performance for Black girls. Believing that Black is beautiful, an important mantra of self-acceptance and self-love could pay major dividends in school, a new study finds. Now, this is I've talked about this in some of my presentations, some of my lectures, especially during African American History Month, because all of this is connected. So, this was a study that appeared in the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, um, and it focuses on a new study from Sharita Butler Barnes, Professor Sharita Butler Barnes, a professor at Washington University in St. Louis. And the study finds that young Black women, young African American women with strong racial identity are more likely to be academically engaged, curious, and persistent. Okay, African American, young African American women or African American girls with strong racial identity are more likely to be academically engaged, curious, and persistent. So the survey looked at 733 African American middle and high school girls in three socioeconomic school districts in the Midwest. The study is called Promoting Resilience Among African American Girls, Racial Identity as a Protective Factor. Promoting Resilience Among African American Girls, Racial Identity as a Protective Factor. And it was published on the Childhood Development Journal website. And it found that feeling positive about being Black, along with feeling supported by their schools, correlated with the girls' greater academic motivation. Now, researchers also found that feeling good about your racial identity could act as a buffer for students in hostile or negative academic environments. And there are a number of studies that show a positive correlation between African American children doing better in school academically, having higher self-esteem, et cetera, and knowing more about themselves, knowing more about their history, being involved in cultural events, different things like this. Okay. So, your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow the people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you've been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. All right. So here's an overview of some of the things that we deal with in the course. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, shocking archaeological discoveries that are causing experts to rethink everything, how insurance companies, I think I skipped a slide. Hold on. Did I skip a slide? Yeah. What was, let's start with this one here. What was the transatlantic slave trade? What were some of the events that led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place? So we try to deal with things chronologically to understand cause and effect. What role did Christopher Columbus play? Columbus was central to the spread of the transatlantic slave trade. Columbus and his 4 voyages, and he's going into the Bahamas and Puerto Rico and Honduras and Panama and different things like this. And they're setting up, the Spanish are setting up these plantations, especially sugarcane plantations. And this increases the need for Africans there enslaving and killing off indigenous people, the native people and Taino and different things like this, the Arawaks. And in some of these areas that he's in, there are already African people there, as Dr. David Imhotep talks about in The First Americans Were Africans, documented evidence. But then they're going to have to bring in African people based upon their concept, bring in Africans, enslave them, and then you're going to see 1517 with the Asiento de Negros and King Charles I. You're going to, also known as King Charles V. You're going to see like 1517, 1518, you're going to see the Spanish exclusively enslave African people. And that's after a conversation that Right Reverend Bishop Bartolome de las Casas has with the King of Spain. And he says that the indigenous people, the native people have suffered enough, and you should exclusively enslave African people. And see, the Spanish were the second ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. You have the Portuguese, they're the first ones involved in 1441, and then the Spanish are right behind them. And Spain and Portugal are where the Moors first go into Europe, the Iberian Peninsula, which is right above Morocco. All right. So we deal with when did Africans first coming to the U.S. as slaves? Did Africans sell themselves into slavery? We deal with that complicated history. Were African people in America before the slave trade? We've been in this land we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years ago. At least 51,700 years ago. And Dr. David Imhotep deals with this in the first Americans were Africans, documented evidence. These were the Khoisan, who have the oldest DNA on the planet and go all around the world. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. We do with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, shocking archaeological discoveries that are causing experts to rethink everything. Insurance companies that took out insurance policies on slave ships and enslaved Africans on the plantations, okay, which is really a deep history. And there were about 40 U.S. insurance companies that sold insurance policies on enslaved Africans, okay? And they didn't just sell them on the slave ships, they also sold insurance policies on Africans on the plantations as well. One of the most well-known insurance companies started out in 1845, known as the Nautilus Mutual Life Insurance Company. I think it was called the Nautilus Mutual Life Insurance Company. Then they changed their name to the New York Life Insurance Company. And for the first 3 years of their existence, they sold insurance policies on enslaved Africans. It was something like 400, 500 insurance policies. There was a huge article from the New York Times about this three or 4 years ago. There was a huge article from the New York Times about this. I talked about it on my radio show when it came out. But it's a deep history. Okay, now also to their credit, the New York Life Insurance Company has been pretty upfront with that history, unlike some other ones. They've been pretty upfront about that history. Okay, so we deal with Freemasonry, America, and the Founding Fathers, which is a deep history that ties into Tony Browder and Egypt on the Potomac, origins of the term America, Africa, and more. So I tried to dispel a lot of myths as well. And we talk about the fake Willie Lynch letter 1712. As the article from the USA Today showed, you had a teacher that was using it during a Black History Month lesson and using it to teach. It's a fraud. Throw that damn thing in the garbage can. We should not be teaching from that. Throw that in the garbage can. I know Dr. Kwabena Ashanti meant well, but now we know. Don't throw that in the garbage can. Use real history. I talked about the problem with slave movies. We talked about that in last week's class. The problem with slave movies, a proliferation of slave movies. And while we're being bombarded with slave movies and slave TV shows, I originally talked about that back in like 2016. Okay. And we deal with that some more. I was just on the Tammy Mack show, the Tammy Mack Late Show on Fox Soul TV. And this was on Tuesday, March 23rd. And we dealt with the rise, the boom in biracial advertising. And I actually did a broadcast, and it's on YouTube. I did the broadcast back in June of 2018. This was the month after the royal wedding, Meghan Markle, Mary, and Prince Harry. And I'm going through breaking this down and how this can also possibly be an attack on African-American men as well. Overrepresentation of white men with African-American women in these TV commercials, being married and things like this. But one of the things I talked about was the TV show The Last OG, starring Tracy Morgan. Unfortunately, is up for some awards at the NAACP Image Awards. But when we contrast that, when we look at that as well as the slave movies, all this is programming. Okay, all this is programming, and your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results. And as one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffrey, says, whoever controls the images controls the self-esteem, the self-development, the self-worth. Whoever controls the history controls the people. When you look at the TV show The Last OG, And I like Tracy Morgan. I love Tiffany Haddish and all her black girl Eritrean magic. Okay, because her father's from Eritrea in East Africa, right next to Ethiopia. Um, you have you have this guy Trey, who was a drug dealer, ends up going to jail. Okay, his girlfriend was Shay, and I think his name was Trey in the show. Um, he ends up going to prison. Okay, he gets caught selling drugs. He ends up going to prison. He was set up actually um, selling drugs, and he goes to prison for a number of years. He gets out of prison, finds out that his he ended up having two children he didn't know about. Apparently, they're twins. Two children he didn't know about by his girlfriend Shay, Tiffany Haddish. She's remarried. She's married to a white man, living a very good life, big house. She has a career. She went to school, everything. The children are in private school, and he's trying to now establish a relationship with children he didn't know. He's living in the halfway house. There's one episode where he starts selling drugs again. He's selling crack because he wants to be like Robin Hood, rob from the rich and give to the poor. But if you look at a proliferation of biracial commercials, and the majority of these commercials show white men with African American women, even though African American men are twice as likely to marry outside of their race as African American women. This Pew Research report on this also. You look at the Pew Research. You look at the Pew Research from, let's see, we look at the one from 2017, May 18, 2017, intermarriage in the U.S. 50 years after Loving versus Virginia. And that's the Loving versus Virginia was the U.S. Supreme Court case in 1967 that legalized interracial marriage because it was still illegal in some southern states. But you have this show that really promotes, to me, it shows how you can have a good life married to a white man. That really shows. And some of that can be reinforced in some of these commercials as well. You know, so, but that's another conversation. But we talked about that on the Tammy Mack Late Night Show. Dr. Wendell Seffo was sitting in for Tammy for this week. So, all right. This is Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of my teachers. He said, he says, whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, self-respect, and self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. And this deals with the power of image. This is why the power of image is so important. Okay, this is why we have to be careful of the images that we allow our children to consume and that we consume ourselves as well. That's why we have to be careful of this. All right. So how's everybody doing on Facebook and YouTube? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in as well. We're doing an overview of the online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is normally an 8-week, 16-hour online course that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history. We deal with what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place also. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have video clips, book references, or articles. There's about 50 articles that I reference in the class. Normally, class meets on Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If for some reason you can't do it on Tuesdays, we will do it the next day on Wednesday. I do this classes live, online. You can ask questions in class with the live chat, with the text chat. All the sessions are recorded. All the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch it over and over again. So as soon as you register, you can watch last week's class and some other classes as well. There's also bonus content there as well. Okay. All right. So the class is regularly $130 on sale, $80. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content. All right. Let's continue here. Let me show you this from the Pew Research, because I did a lot of research to prepare for my appearance on the Tammy Mack late show. Actually, I over prepared because most of the stuff I studied I didn't get a chance to talk about. But I always do that. I always over prepare. I always do research for interviews and things like that, and I always over prepare. That's just me. Intermarriage in the U.S. 50 years after Loving versus Virginia. And I had research that I did back in June 2018 when I did my broadcast dealing with the increase in biracial advertising. So this is one of the things, this is one of the pieces of research that I did back in 2018. 1 in 6 newlyweds are married to someone of a different race or ethnicity. Okay, 1 in 6 newlyweds. Read this from Pew Research, May 18th, 2017. Intermarriage in the U.S. 50 years after Loving versus Virginia. This is at pewresearch.org. Pewresearch.org. All right, let's continue here. Let's go back to the slides so we can wrap this up. So I'm doing a brief overview of a lot of content of the online class that I teach. Let's look at this here. So we deal with the problem with slave movies while we're being bombarded with slave movies and slave themed TV show. We saw this a lot in 2016. Saw this a lot in 2016. It's to a lesser extent now. Okay. It's to a lesser extent now. Now, I also talk about Asar, Offset, and Heru and the origins of the Immaculate Conception story. That's deep. You got to deal with that because Europeans, even before the Moors going to Europe, Europeans were worshiping the Black Madonna and Child. Where'd they get that from? That came from Offset and Heru. Okay, they came from Isis and Horus, Asar, Offset, and Heru. Okay. And then we deal with links to the ancient Kemet and early Christianity. Okay, that's important as well. Freemasonry in America, and the Fate Willie Lynch letter of 1712. The Fate Willie Lynch letter of 1712. All right. Okay, so we have Runoko Rashidi. This is Dr. David Imhotep, and you know Runoko. I reference his book in the class. Black Star: The African Presence over Early Europe. Okay, Black Star: The African Presence over early Europe, and also this is Renoko's book, Black Star: The African Presence over Early Europe, and also use Golden Age of the Moor. Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Reference that as well. Okay, Golden Age of the Moor. 2 excellent books. Okay, so let's see here. Let's continue. All right. So this is Dr. David Imhotep. He wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Came out 2011. His new book should be out any day now, actually. The First Americans Were Africans Revisited is his new book. I just interviewed him. I just had him. He spoke to my class a few weeks ago. So page 14 of his book, he deals with the discovery that took place in 2004 in Allendale County, South Carolina. And there was 13 types of evidence that thoroughly documented an African presence in this country that we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found, so Dr. Albert Goodyear is an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, tools. They found 13 different disciplines 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documenting an African presence in the U.S. going back at least 51,700 years ago. Now, this is before Native Americans came into existence. This is one of the problems with some of the African, well, a lot of Black History Month celebrations and presentations, even though they are important. And I, deal with the whole history of African American History Month and Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Even though they are important, in this one right here is a good book dealing with the history, dealing with Dr. Carter G. Woodson and his history. This is by Dr. Payro Dakbovie, who is a history professor at Michigan State University. This is Carter G. Woodson in Washington, D.C., the father of Black history. Carter G. Woodson in Washington, D.C., the father of Black history. Okay. If it wasn't for Dr. Carter G. Woodson, we wouldn't have an African American History Month or Black History Month. Okay. It starts in 1926, officially as Negro History Week. And 1976, it becomes a monthly celebration. But it was never designed to be the only time of the year that we study our history. Okay. There's a period of time of celebrations and different things like this, lectures. It was never designed to be the only time of the year we study our history. And in schools, he said, he educated teachers and said that this was supposed to be the week out of the year that students showed what they had been studying all year round. Because he said it didn't make sense for children just to study this subject 1 week out of 36. They're supposed to be studying our history year round. In that 1 week, the second week in February, they're supposed to show what they have been studying all year round. So a lot of this we just have backwards. Okay, let's continue here. So this is Dr. Albert Goodyear. This is an article from ScienceDaily.com. Name of this article: New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 years ago. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. This is from ScienceDaily.com, November 18th, 2018. And Science Daily is a scientific website. They have all types of scientific discoveries, things like that there. This is a synopsis of the article. It says radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May. Now, keep in mind, this discovery is made in 2004. Okay, so this is 17 years ago. Where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age, Well, who were these humans? Okay, these were the Khoisan. This is before Native Americans come into existence. These were the Khoisan who come from Southern Africa, go all around the world. Also, they're the ancestors to Dainu and the Twa, and they were here in this land also. Okay, so we deal with archaeological discoveries. I'll show you some different archaeological discoveries in recent years. We deal with the Druids, and this ties into the history of St. Patrick. Okay, so some people just celebrated St. Patrick's Day. I'm not one of them because Patrick was a mass murderer on behalf of the Eastern Orthodox Christian Church. He was a mass murderer. So we talk about the discoveries, things like this. And then let's see here. This is a discovery dealing with Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt. Okay, that discovery is from 2013. And Tanis Heraklion swallowed into the sea about 1,200 years ago. Okay. Research that Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt. All right, very quickly here, if we look at, so we also deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. And the Moors are taking the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt into Europe. And this is going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. So you have to understand like this chronology of history and what's going on in Europe when the Moors go in 711 AD. And then what this leads to. So this is a tekken. We see the tekken in ancient Kemet. The Greeks call it an obelisk. We see the Washington Monument. That is a tekken also. That's an ancient African symbol of resurrection coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru. Okay. The Greeks call them Isis, Osiris, and Horus once again. And we know that 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. And we know that Freemasonry, the teachings from Freemasonry, has its foundation in ancient Africa, especially the Nile Valley region of Africa, specifically ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Okay, now they're dealing with watered down teachings, of course, but this is where this comes from. So if we look at Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder, pages 18 and 32. And Browder's a bad brother. He's a friend of mine. I've interviewed Brother Browder before, I think about 6 times in the past. And this is one of the books that we use in the class also, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, as well as Egypt on the Potomac. And where's that book? We got Egypt. I've got it right around here somewhere. We got a bunch of books here. Egypt on the Potomac. Oh, right here. Egypt on the Potomac, right here. Excellent book. Short book, about 70 pages or so. Egypt on the Potomac deals with how the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon ancient African principles. Okay. And how the layout of Washington, D.C. is a copy of the layout of ancient Egypt. But the word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun, S-O-N. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light. Okay, the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. The term child of light or sons and daughters of light was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study, in the temples of ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. So also when you read George G.M. James' book, Stolen Legacy, he deals with some of this type of information as well. So the liberal arts, the 7 liberal arts, the trivium and the quadrivium, the arithmetic and logic and things like this, the whole concept of liberal arts colleges comes out of ancient Africa, ancient Kemet. And when you go to college, you get your credentials in a series of degrees, right? Associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD. This is where this comes from. This is where this comes from. And for eons, for millennia, light has been associated with knowledge. Darkness has been associated with ignorance. If you watch cartoons, right? We'll come to your question in just a second. If you watch cartoons, you can see the cartoon character could be Doc McStuffins, or it could be Mickey Mouse. It could any Tom and Jerry, any cartoon character. My daughter likes Paw Patrol. I didn't know what Paw Patrol was till she started singing the theme song. Okay, but if they get a bright idea, and bright is associated with knowledge as well, you'll see a little light bulb go off over their head, right? To symbolize an idea, to symbolize knowledge. And if you have a child in school that's a smart child, the teacher may say that's a bright child, B-R-I-G-H-T. G-H-T, bright. Knowledge associated with light. If the child is not too bright, right? Lack of light, or you say that's a dim child, D-I-M, dim light. The absence of light or less light associated with ignorance. More darkness associated with ignorance. Okay. So when we look at this here, we see the term child of light or sons and daughter of light was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. This is associated with knowledge. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. All of this is connected. It takes us right back to ancient Africa. Okay, we keep trying to run away from ourselves. We keep trying to run away from ourselves, and people are running to what we created. We should be tired. Our legs should be tired of running by now. Did you know that 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence and 13 of the 39 signers of the U.S. Constitution were Freemasons? Did you know that 4 of the first U.S. presidents were Freemasons, and there have been 14 Freemasons who have been U.S. presidents? So Browder talks about this on page 18 of Egypt on the Potomac. Okay, so this is Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. We definitely deal with this as well, the first Holy Trinity. We talk about we talk about the TV show Isis. We talk about the TV show, the Secrets of Isis, TV show from DC Comics from the 1970s. And then, let's see, okay, so we deal with some of this. Why is Christmas on December 25th as well? Nowhere in the biblical text does it say that it may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you disagree with it or don't like it, does not mean it's not true. Just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. Nowhere in the biblical text does it say that Jesus the Christ or Yeshua was born on December 25th, because the letter J wasn't created till 1630 AD either. So we deal with some of that history as well. Try to deal with this chronology of history. Okay. Let's see here. And then, we talk about once again, we deal with the Moors and deal with things like, I tie this into news articles that you'll see in the news, but not really understand the connection to the deep history, whether it's talking about Black Pete, Joie de Piet, and the parades that they have like every early December in the Netherlands, Holland, things like this. So Black Pete, who was a Moor. But this right here, these are the national flags of Corsica and Sardinia. We showed this in the class last week. We went in depth into this. These are African Moors heads on the flags because the Moors were in these areas and it was a monumental effort to conquer them. Okay. And many of them were going to be enslaved. They're going to be conquered and enslaved. And you see them as bandanas. They have bandanas on. But originally, these bandanas were blindfolds to signify that they were prisoners, that they were conquered. This all ties into the history of the Moors in these areas and throughout Europe. Okay. So it's a very, very deep history. All right. So we deal with that. We deal with Christopher Columbus and where Columbus went on his 4 voyages and how Columbus was central to the spread of not just disease, okay, and decimating populations he's coming into contact with, but he's central to the spread of slavery, racism, capitalism, and exploitation of indigenous people also. Columbus on his 4 voyages. He never comes to the land that we call the United States of America, which is really, really important for people to understand. When you look at, if you go to history.com, search for Christopher Columbus, they have a lot of good information there. They show you where he went on his 4 voyages. He never came to the land we call the United States of America. The closest he came here was Cuba, which is 90 miles away. Okay. He's in Haiti and Jamaica and Cuba, Puerto Rico, Honduras, Panama, Trinidad, things like this. He never comes to this landmass that we call the United States of America. All right, and let's see here. And then we deal with So we also talk about we deal with the article from Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. We deal with we talk about African involvement in the slave trade, and I cite Dr. Maleficenti Asante and his critique of Henry Louis Gates Jr., who one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, calls Dr. Henry Louis skipped the truth gates, because oftentimes he skips over the truth, even though Gates does do some good research. But some of his information dealing with the transatlantic slave trade and African involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, he's backed by European corporations, and what he's really trying to do is absolve Europeans that have to pay reparations, to say, oh, the African involvement was as equal as European involvement. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Who owned the slave ships? Who owned the insurance companies? Who wrote the Asiento de Negros? Okay. Who were the ones who really profited off of the transatlantic slave trade? It wasn't the Africans. And then you had the European nations, when they're going in, they're telling the African chiefs, if you don't bring us a certain number of slaves when we come back or what have you, we're going to enslave you and your people. So you have to go and see well, who rebuilt their nations based upon the slave trade, who profited off of the sugarcane plantations. Okay, this is Europeans. All right, so those are some of the things that we deal with in the uh, in the online class. I talk about Professor Manu Ampem. I interviewed him back November 21st, 2013. We dealt with the fake Willie Lynch letter of 1712. You can visit his website, manuampem.com. Manuampem.com. I just interviewed him back in June of 2020, or July. I think it was July 2020. We talked about the passing of John Lewis. And we talked about some other things as well. We talked about SNCC and the Black Power movement, things like this. So he's a brilliant, brilliant historian. Okay, let's see here. So that's just an overview. That's just some of the things that we deal with in the class. We talk about the three great West African kingdoms of Ghana, Songhai, and Mali as well, of course. You definitely have to talk about that as well. Ghana, Songhai, and Mali. And you have Moors coming from West Africa as well, going into Europe. All right, so that's a brief overview of the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You can register. We'll post a link here. You can register for it right now. As soon as you register, you can watch the class we did last week. And we normally do the classes on Tuesdays, 8 p.m., 10 p.m., 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right about that. So I had to do my radio show at 11 p.m. There's been a couple of Tuesdays. If I can't do it, we'll do it Wednesday. But this will keep you busy. You can watch from around the world. We deal with thousands of years of history also. Okay. And let me see. Somebody had a question here. Oh, okay. Watching from Belize, Central America. Okay, Kimberly. How you doing, Kimberly? Thank you. Will class be presented? Rosa asked, will the class be presented again? You can, well, any classes that you miss, you can go back and watch them. They're all archived. All the classes are archived. All the classes are archived. And we have bonus content that you can watch, and I'm uploading more bonus content also. So all the classes are archived. This is an 8-week, 16-hour online class. We're going to do a 9th week. I'm going to add an additional class because I had 2 guest speakers in the class, so that kind of threw things off a little bit, being able to cover the content. But you can go back and watch all this content. You can watch it at your own pace also. So even if you can't join the class live, you can still register for it and watch it at your own content also. And you can watch from around the world. You can watch in Belize. You can watch in Belize as well. All right. So You can visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And right on the home page, we have the information. We posted the link here, but on the home page, we have the information. So when you go to our website, you'll see the information about about my radio show. We're on 6 days a week, 6 nights a week. And you scroll down, so you have the information about the radio show, the African History Network show. You click here for podcasts. We're on Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time, and Sunday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. We broadcast right here, also on Facebook and YouTube. The African History Network on Facebook and Michael Imhotep on YouTube. Click here to read articles that I've written. Okay, this is a video I did dealing with Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion at the Grammys and WAP. Go back and watch that. I go deep into this. Go back and watch that, and then watch the panel discussion I did with the sisters back in August of 2020, dealing with WAP and negative corporate controlled hip hop. All right, so then you have information here for the show. For the class. Click here to register here. Takes you to the next page, and click right here to enroll. As soon as you enroll, you can start watching the content, and you'll be ready for the next class. What's the name of the PDF? You're talking about Teaching Hard History American Slavery. Teaching Hard History American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's in PDF form also. Teaching Hard History American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's about a 56-page study that documents how the history of slavery is being incorrectly taught in schools all across America, and how to more correctly teach the history. Teaching Hard History American Slavery. Also, if you like this type of information, you want to support the African History Network, you could do so through Cash App, $, the AHN Show, through Cash App, or through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep doing our show 6 days a week, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. When you do it through Cash App, be sure to type in $, the AHN Show. Okay, through Cash App, and it'll say Michael, and it'll have my picture there also. All right, $, the AHN Show, SHOW. All right, well, look, hey, we're on. Be sure to listen to my radio show on Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm on 6 days a week. We broadcast here on Facebook and YouTube at the same when I'm doing the radio show. Turn on live notifications so you know when we go live on social media, on Facebook and YouTube. Okay, and share this with your friends. And I'll see you in the next class. All right. Remember, right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace. Thanks for watching.